Hello, I'm Margaret Liston from the Speaking of Art Committee, and I'm here to introduce Norman Lundin, and I have notes. Norman, Norman is a very skilled and accomplished artist. I guess at least some of you know that. He could paint anything, and so it's really interesting what he chooses to paint. Okay. His work is a lot about space, light, shadow, and reflection. He often paints landscapes, still lifes, the figure, and empty space. That's harder. For me, his signature images are from the old days. I just know this blackboard in an old schoolroom with light coming diagonally in the window, and you can see the chalk sitting on the blackboard. That's always been one of my favorites. But he might be painting a grocery bag, or the other kind of definitive one for me is a little jar of water. And it's a wonderful painting. So, this is what I think of when I see him, but we'll see what he shows us, so that will be fun. But also, I want to point out that he's an educator. He's University of Washington Professor Emeritus, the art department, and he was a favorite of a lot of the painting students because he actually taught people how to paint, which that wasn't something on all the faculty's agenda. And so he was well appreciated at the U. So welcome, Norman Lundin.
Thank you. Is this, I've been, now? Oh, I see, that close, all right. All right.
Horizontal.
All right. I think I got the hang of it. I've been in the art world all of my life, ever since I was 18. I worked for a museum. I've taught at the UW for 40 years. I ran an art gallery, so I know the art world in its whole, and from all aspects. And early in life, my teachers, told my mother that, oh, your son is gifted, or, things like that. So my mother said, well, I should take him down to the Art Institute of Chicago. And so that museum I've been going to essentially since I was 7 or 8 years old. And I went to school there. I got my bachelor's degree there. So I've been in the art world a long time. And the painting on the screen, I want to show you some of my influences. The painting on the screen is Edvard Munch's Scream, and you're all familiar with that. Here, that's Edvard Munch's most famous painting. Not his best, by my estimation, but his most famous. And Norway, a small country, but they managed to produce, a couple of artists who can stand alone on the world stage, and Edvard Munch foremost among them. Okay, there. And this is called Seated Child. This is also, but I went to Norway in 1963 on a Fulbright grant from the U.S. government, and primarily to study the work of Edvard Munch and early Scandinavian landscape painting of the 19th century. It was an interesting time. I mean, I was very young, and going to Europe in 1963 was a very, very big deal. And so it was. In those days, they shipped students abroad on steamships. We went from New York to Oslo on a steamship, 4 days and 5 nights. It was a lot of fun. Two years later, they stopped it. But I'm just showing Edvard Munch because he interests me, and when they opened the museum, I had access to his collection. He left everything to the city. He left his pajamas to the city. I mean, he left everything to the city of Oslo. So I'm very familiar with his work. And these are the images of his that you'll see most often, because they tend to be the erotic ones, or the ones that have sort of an extreme sense of emotional heights. There, I'd say that. And that's a self-portrait. But he also was a man of considerable traditional skills. This is a portrait of his sister, Inger. And so it's a little yellow here. But his traditional painting skills were first class in all ways. And this is another one of his famous paintings called The Sick Child. And in the late 19th century, tuberculosis was nearly epidemic. Every family had somebody dying of tuberculosis, a very, very common disease at the time. Another artist, this is Wilhelm Hammershøi. They had a show of his at the Fry about 10 years ago. Some of you may have seen it. Now, if any of you know about contemporary art, the 1960s was the heyday of abstract expressionism. And I, as a young student, was caught up in that. But when I was in Norway, I remember being going with a friend to see an exhibition of American pop art. And it was in Stockholm, and we drove over. Driving from Oslo to Stockholm was like driving from Seattle to Spokane. It's not all that far. Anyway, we drove over to Stockholm, and I remember walking into the museum, and my English friend, it was a painter, he said, "Norm, this is going to be big. We got to get on this." And I said, "Oh," I'm just starting to get interested in artists of like Wilhelm Hammershøi. I was really quite out of step. But he is a painter. We broadcast on the same wavelength, and you will see that from the work. I'm very much influenced by him. Now this is Edwin Dickinson, an artist who painted very ordinary objects, and he also was a considerable influence with me. He's a pretty important American of the mid 20th century. And it's if you look at this, you'll begin to write. It's not an abstract drawing. It's the Winged Victory of Samaras. It's at the Louvre. Does you see it? She doesn't have a head, but you see the wing up there. And so he's not so much drawing the object as drawing how the light hits the object. And I used to tell my students that you can look at an object and describe it, but another way of looking at it is look at how the light hits the object and draw that, and let the result of that observation describe whatever subject matter you're striving for. Another is Edward Berg. And it's just that light hitting. I mean, the drama of the sitting is the Norwegians tend to be it's kind of grim. Even their interior scenes tend to be grim. But what fascinated me here was the table with the cheese on it. Just the table. I'm not so much interested in the figures. Just the table, and you'll see that later. Another Edward Berg painting. You might fear for the relationship of this couple, but it's the figures in nature, and it's quite a beautiful painting. And so these are this is just background for you. I consider Alberto Giacometti to be the foremost, or certainly one of the foremost artists of the 20th century, and that sense of the 1,000-mile stare, this is all there is, there's nothing else, kind of awareness in an existential way. I'm very much impressed with Alberto Giacometti. And once when I was teaching a class at the UW, it was called Art and Music, and I was the art half, and a friend from the music school was teaching the music half. And it was sort of a basic survey of Western art, and we were somewhere in the middle of late Roman art, and I'd read that Giacometti had died, so I interrupted my lectures and gave a a long lecture on Giacometti, and then we went back to ancient Rome. So, this is Thomas Eakins, and people always ask me, from time to time, whom I think would be the foremost American artist of all since the beginning, and I would say, well, without doubt, Thomas Eakins. Is it now? Is he a modern artist? Well, he certainly had a 19th century sensibility, but he lived in the 20th century. But this is Max Schmidt in a single shell. And the roller is certainly the center, but you are very much aware of the environment here. And he could paint light on water in a wonderful way. He's a portrait painter. This is Thomas Eakins. And you all know Edward Hopper. Now this painting is at the Art Institute of Chicago. Edward Hopper he was not an artist of finesse, but he deserves his reputation. And the painting's pretty big. It's about over 6 feet wide, so it's a pretty sizable painting. And what is good about this painting is not so much the skill of description, but the skill of observation. Everything is where it ought to be. Every gesture is correct. It is a true masterpiece. And it is with Hopper, I would say, that the edges of the painting become part of the painting. There's a term one used to use called the Renaissance window, wherein the painting was essentially a window into which you looked into an imaginary or imaginary reality, so to speak. In this case, the window is part of the painting. The edges are vertical to which he relates other aspects. And so, in a sense, I would always encourage my students to think abstractly, but paint descriptively. And if you can do that, you got a leg up. And Edward Hopper was a master at that kind of thinking. Francis Bacon, you may or may not know of him. He tended to deal with screaming popes and fairly horrific subject matter. And nobody ever thinks of Bacon as being a formalist, but he, once again, he knew where to put things. And knowing where to put things is more important than describing those things. You got to get them in the right place. There are many artists who can describe things with infinite detail. It doesn't make them better. You got to put them somewhere. And it's like musical notes. One note doesn't mean much. It only means something when it's next to another note, and then another note after that. So composition is an extremely important aspect of any art form, visual art form. Now, I show you this. This is the 12th century chapel of San Badeo de Belanqua. It is Romanesque paintings. It's at the Cincinnati Art Museum. Anybody here from Cincinnati? Well, if you go there, it's still there. And I went to graduate school at the University of Cincinnati, and and during my third semester, my advisor said, you got to take a course outside of your discipline, and here are some of the available. I'd already taken, a couple semesters of archaeology, and then the time was a course called museology, and I thought, well, I like museums, I'll take that. So it was taught over at the museum, and what we did was meet all the various departments and how museums are run. And I was, I went to the seminar, I wrote my paper, and participated in discussion and so forth. And the semester ended, and we used to meet, incidentally, in the director's office, and his secretary would all have coffee there waiting for us to, there were about 12, 14 of us in the seminar. And so we knew her. Her name was Melissa. And so shortly after that semester was over, I get a call from Melissa, and who never called me. And she said, Norman, the director and Dr. von Goschwitz want to have lunch with you. Now, this is the director of the museum and the head curator. And I thought, why do they want to have lunch with me? And I said, well, sure, of course. And so just before she hung up, she said, oh, Norman, wear a tie. And I said, I own a tie. And and so I met them for lunch, and they said to me that we have a position at the museum. It's going to be called assistant to the director, and we want to appoint you to that position. And I had no idea. This kind of dropped absolutely out of nowhere. But the first thing so I took the job. And obviously they had conferred with my professors, and I got, they said he was, a talented lad. So I built this. It's about 4/5 actual size, very much in the 12th century. And well, I built it with 2 carpenters, but I did all of the painting. This is 12th century, and that's 12th century. That's mine. Everything else is mine. And I'm good at that sort of thing. And it's I show you this because it was the first time I got paid for art, for making art. So I had a perfectly fine job at the museum, but before having, taking the job, I had applied for this Fulbright grant, and the Fulbright came through, and I thought, well, I want to go to Europe. I was, 23 years old, and so I quit, and I went to Europe, and but if you go to Cincinnati, it's still there. I did this in 1963. No, that's my abstract expressionist phase. That's what I did when I was at the Art Institute of Chicago, and that got me a scholar. Well, I submitted it with others, but that was the main painting I got a scholarship for that painting. I still have that. I did it in 1962. And early on, I had I was young. This is my expressionist period. I just come back from Norway and so on. And this piece, this is on paper. It's about I'm going to say 60 inches wide, and it's charcoal and acrylic. And this is pencil here, and it reflects light differently than, so you sort of see it and sort of don't see it. And this is, and both of these were shown at the Whitney Museum, I think in 1969. I don't work that way anymore. But that was, once again, that's my Edvard Munch sort of period right there. I taught portrait painting for many years, and did some. Don't do it anymore. In fact, I haven't done it in 30 years. But this is a portrait. This is one of my students who modeled for classes at the UW, and she had a very not beautiful face, but very face with a lot of character, and that's important, So I did a couple portraits of her. Here's another one, and this is oil on paper, and it's about maybe 30 inches high, and one more. So you can see that she had character. And I would tell students, when you're painting a portrait, you want to get a likeness, but you also got to give them, some kind of background, some kind of gravitas. I've always liked dogs. I've had dogs all my life. This is George. He was a Norwegian elkhound. And people ask me if I use photos in my painting, and I say, oh, yes. It was hard to get George to hold a running pose. So, but that's acrylic on canvas, maybe 48 inches high. And this is George again. I changed the spots, but that's just for the composition. This won the best prize for an artist under 35 at this Seattle Open. Seattle Art Museum doesn't have open competitions anymore, but they used to in the old days. Now the dog Pompeii, the dog of Pompeii. It's quite familiar. They was caught in the eruption. This is based on that. So keep this in mind because you'll see something towards the end of the lecture on that. This is made of a substance similar to concrete. It's what contractors use to repair cracks in concrete. And it has an armature and so on. And this is bronze. I did do some sculpture. This is a bronze, about life size. Oh, incidentally, if you have questions, let fly. I don't have to wait. And I've done, these I still have. These are about the size of the palm of your hand. There's a terracotta. Figure painting, I've done lots. I will say, I do a lot of female nudes, and I will say that the human figure is the central concern of Western art. It's not the only concern, it's just the central one. But of that, it's the female form. And if you look through history, there's male nudes, of course, but you'll find that it's predominantly the female form. And so these are the drawings. These are from life. And but the thematic idea of standing solo figure has always appealed to me. So these are all the same model. And this is a painting, i.e., of a painting, which is an idea that has intrigued me over the years because it's obviously somebody naked in the middle of a painting is going to get your attention, but it's just an idea, a visual idea. That's all. Question? No, I make up the environment, and the figure is based on a drawing. Yeah. That's the first lithograph I ever did. This 1968. It's called "I Am Beautiful." Lithographs are hard because it's particularly if you're a novice, as I was. You can't back up. It's all forward. You know, there's no subtraction. It's all addition. This is oil on paper. It's just, I'm just showing you a bunch of figures. And here, I had a model stand in my studio, but rather than putting the model in the model stand, I had my easel in the model stand, and she was on the floor just to get a different perspective. So, I'm only regretting a little bit now. I had a flat file, with they're about this deep. It was just filled with drawings, many of them not very good. So rather than going through the whole thing, I just threw the whole hundreds of figure drawings like this out. And I regret that a little bit now, but probably threw away 1,000 drawings. And this one, this is quite a large drawing. It's about 48 inches high. And it was with this one where I, working the figure, of course, this is one of the art rooms in the art building at the UW. I thought I liked the space more than I liked the model. And so it was from this drawing I began to do other kinds of subject matter like this, which are imaginary spaces, but I intend them to be plausible architectural environments. This is pastel, and it's about 28 inches wide. And so I did, there was a show, actually it was a museum traveling show, I think it was around 1990, that was just mostly of my pastels. Oh yeah, I should add this. About 2 years ago, the Palace of Legion of Honor at the San Francisco Museum, they put together a history of pastel with all the big guys. I mean, Degas was in it. Everybody who's famous is in it, and they had 2 of mine. So I just tossed that out. And so these are all pastels, and it's I remember years ago when I was in art school, I was looking at an exhibition of photographs. I can't remember the photographer's name, but somebody you'd probably recognize. And it was called The Beauty of Everyday Objects. And it was just like open a drawer and there'd be all your knives and forks and spoons. And I thought it was a beautiful exhibition. I looked at it and said, it's not the objects that are beautiful, it's the photo that's beautiful. And that there's a difference there. Because, I mean, I open a drawer filled with knives, forks, and spoons every day, and I don't stop to reflect upon the beauty. But it's how the light hits the objects. And so taking something that is so ordinary and which has no emotional content of its own, I mean, it's just light on a wall, and make it interesting. And I have an assignment I used to give to art students, and it's called the White Cup assignment. And it would be towards the end of the term when they develop some observational skills, and I'd say, what do you think is hard to draw? And they would, come up with all sorts of things. I said, well, that's complicated. I'll give you something hard to draw. And I said, bring in a paper cup, and I say, it's not hard to draw. What's hard to do is make it interesting. And it's something that's so ubiquitous as a paper cup. And following through on that, when I was running my art gallery, the idea, I put together an exhibition called the White Cup Show. And that was the artist put in, and everything had to be, it could be ceramic, that'd be paper. But just it is taking something that is the most ordinary thing you can find. And it's in all our homes and so forth, and do something with it to make it interesting. And you find out how damn hard that is to do. Question? Oh, that's from my mind's eye. Yeah. Mostly, I don't look at things when I paint them, but that's not an absolute rule. If I need to look at something, I'll go look at it. But generally, things don't look the way I want them to look. So if I'm painting a landscape, I think, well, that tree would be much better over here than it is there, and so pretty much that's how I work, and for better or worse, and sometimes it is for the worse. But these pastels are ideas that I worked with. Sometimes they're quite large. This one's about 48 inches high. But the idea of a plain wall and light on the wall. 1980s. Yeah. This is more or less chronological. We're kind of moving. Well, no, it's not quite chronological. But thematically, I'm still dealing with these. Pastels are, pretty labor intensive, and to the point where, as I was telling you, when I was getting physical, my doctor said we should wear a respirator because and yes, and if you looked around my easel, actually the pastel dust rises, because the ceiling was covered with dust, and so it's probably a good idea. But who wants to work with a respirator? So, but these are all thematically that kind of idea. Once again, very, very simple, everyday things, and try to make it interesting. Just yeah. So, well, and sometimes I put a figure in. This is an incomplete painting. I took a picture of it in progress. I was sort of dealing with it, the Manet's bar at the Folies Bergère, where there are people reflected but are not, are they in the mirror? And so I was going to put a table here, but not quite the table you see in there. And is that a mirror? But I never finished it. But I kind of, if you just block out the lower part, it's a very nice painting. So this is what Margaret was referring to. the blackboard. This is pastel. I did some in oil. And of course, if you're going to do a blackboard, being me, you put a nude in front of it. You just do. And this one was purchased by the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And I happened to have been out of the country when they had the exhibition, which this was in. But a friend wrote to me and said, "Norm, I was at the Museum of Modern Art. I saw your work." Yeah, that's a big thrill if you're a painter. And this one's an oil painting. And people ask me what the ovals mean, and they mean absolutely nothing. They're just abstract shapes, but they look like they mean something, and that's the important point. And this is studies. This one's probably 10 inches wide, oil, and I have done a couple of paintings where I do paintings of drawings, and that's a drawing of a goat skeleton. Similar, that's the same idea. That's a goat skeleton. Now, why a goat? I have no idea. But I do have animal skulls in our home that people have given me. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Question.
What's a study?
Oh, something that you do in preparation for something else.
So when you described the painting, one painting ago,
Yeah.
as a study, does that mean that you thought it was incomplete?
Well, no, it's something you do in anticipation of doing a larger version. And if you artist exhibits a study, the art is essentially a byproduct of the intention as opposed to the intention. It's not done necessarily to be it's to work out visual ideas. That's all. Rough draft. Pardon?
Did you draw the drawing in this?
Yes.
You drew it, and then you painted, the rest is paint.
The drawing is I put down oil paint and I just use graphite, which it gets dissolved by the oil paint, so it gets very black. Just using a number 5 graphite pencil. And so that's what these are. These, as I say, these are sort of thinking pieces, that may evolve into something or may not. And this is an idea of trying to get a sense of space on an absolutely flat two-dimensional plane. So this is a door, a metal door. And this is, once again, this is 48 inches high. It's just drapery. It's just a chair with a white sheet thrown over it and put a floodlight on it. But I like it. As well. It's on buff colored paper. It's not discolored there. And it's charcoal. Well, it's sort of like the white cup thing, trying to make something interesting out of something very ordinary. And this is a white tablecloth. Keep in mind that painting I showed you of the room interior Norwegian. In fact, I think this is one that's in the collection at the Inman Theater. Last time I was there, it was there. Anyhow, but I haven't been there in a couple of years, so I'm not sure it's there. And a white towel. This is watercolor. Watercolor is oftentimes people think that watercolor is the easiest medium because it's so accessible. It is the most difficult medium. Transparent watercolor is the most difficult. And for that reason, I don't use it very often. But this is a watercolor. And I'm not sure the date, but I'd say I toss out 1990 as a rough approximation. And this would be pastel. And that would be acrylic. It's an idea one can do over and over and get different results.
So you're trying to go for some kind of illusion of depth here.
Oh, yeah.
Shallow depth.
Yeah, well, air. I like to paint breathable air. That's, you'll see that in my landscapes too. which I'll get to. And once again, just this drapery, these are what I would use in a figure painting class for the model to sit on, so they'd have some pattern. Yeah. Oh yes, I know. I'm kind of embarrassed by it. I tend, as you've already probably seen, tends toward a muted palette, which has lots of color, and it's just that it's sort of down at the bottom end of color. But if called upon, I can do. Painting a blue sky certainly I can do, but it's very hard for me. And this is a theme that I still carry through to working on this day. I'm going early 90s, and I was driving across. I tend to drive around North America. I've driven coast to coast, across Canada, through Mexico, for the last 60 years. In fact, my wife and I are going to make a trip back to the Midwest. Pardon? I had a microbus, yes. Oh, microbus. Somebody said I had a microbus. I did have a microbus, but now I have a microphone. But I would make them with my children, read camp and go to the national parks and things. So, but I remember I was by myself once and driving across Montana in probably April, but spring comes late to Montana, and it was bleak and there was still snow. And I remember getting out of the truck just to take a break and thinking, this is what I want to try to paint. That sense of the air, the rain's not quite ice, that kind of atmosphere. And so, and as I say, thematically, I'm still doing it. I'm working on some paintings as we speak of the tundra in Alaska. And these would be oil. This is the previous one was probably 5 feet wide. This would be about 30 inches wide. But see, blue sky, sort of. But this is more mine. This is a charcoal drawing. And this is thematically the same. This is oil painting on the red is the paper is size. We call it sizing. You can't paint oil on regular paper because it rots it, so you got to size it with something. You got to seal it. In this case, I use a red acrylic paint or burnt sienna. And once again, something very simple. Just, but I like it. Lights bouncing off the fence posts. I like the wire too, the way the wire is painted. And that's from a trip to Alaska, which I took with a friend about 20 years ago. This is the tundra. Lands. Well, I only did this because a friend gave me a stretcher. It's 26 inches high and 7 feet wide. So I thought, well, what can I put on that? It's not a shape I would ordinarily use, but so I did this painting. And here, once again, this is based on over the wildlife preserve there, not far from the university, and the gallery that represents my work in Los Angeles is having a show called 25 to celebrate 25 years, and so the theme of the show was 25. Do you guys think they'd have that? And I thought, oh well. I just added a couple more birds. I said 25 birds. So there you go. But once again, I'm trying to get the sense of breathable air. And this is a painting I did for a friend who's an architect who did some remodeling for us. And well, driving into a city in evening. I like this one. It works. This would be a study. It's on a red ground, so that's in the red. And red grounds are historically artists do that. I mean, you can put any kind of ground you want, but you don't want to paint on white, because when you paint on white, then all you put down are darker colors. You want to start in the middle and then work both ways. So you want a mid-value color, and historically it goes from reds to any kind of sort of neutral color, and red is a very common one. And this is black and white on red paper. That's the oil. And this would be on white gesso. This is oil on a white gesso paper. That one exception. You use it when you want your paint to be transparent and have the light of the paper show through. So that would be the time. And so this is on white paper, as is this. But these are all transparent colors here, and then the white over there, that's opaque. And this is a small oil. I'm going to say 20 inches wide. And thematically, I'm going to try this one again. Slightly different composition, but with the white trees in the distance.
You're saying the white trees are part of the background color, or you add?
Although they're added, yeah. They're sort of drawn on, and then I go back over. This is called tornado weather. This is, driving across Montana. I've driven across Montana many, many times, but one time I was driving across in midday, and it was so smoky I could drive. I'm going 15 miles an hour, and finally I see a police car. He comes up to me and says, "You want to fight a fire? You get $50 a day." And I said, "No." So he gave me directions how to go around it on the state route, and I looked back and I saw the fire. But anyway, the idea of the vast spaces in nature. And this is called the Fire Gets to Peterson's Crossing. And I like the fire, and I'm playing with scale here. And this painting has been modified since this photo, but the buildings I felt looked too big. They look like farm buildings, all right, but I felt they were too big. So rather than making the buildings smaller, you change the scale. You make the road bigger, and then that makes the building smaller. So there's little things like that. You have to tell students that there are other ways of making something smaller than actually changing the size. So the version that came after this. The road is still there, but it's a wider road, and so the buildings are smaller. But this is
What fire was it?
they're imaginary, but they're based on that scene I described. I was driving my Volkswagen van. And you could look back, and the whole sky was covered in black smoke with this bright fire. A grass fire had gotten out of control, I guess is what it was. So that's where these come from, all based on that.
Painting sketches, so you can remember.
Some yes and no. More no than yes.
What was the question?
Pardon?
What was the comment? We didn't hear the comment.
Oh, she asked, do I make sketches to keep sort of visual memory? No, I don't. Constable did. And he had a whole file of clouds, and he said, "Well, I'll put this one in the painting." Just to be practical. This is called the painting platform, but it's essentially a still life. Some more of those. These are small oils on paper. This is out on the Olympic Peninsula. And so there's blue sky. This is, once again, over there in the wildlife sanctuary, off of 45th there. So these are very small, like 12 by 15, that sort of size. And these are done on the spot. I do plein air painting. I used to go painting with Paul Havas, a friend, But only him, actually, because I need to be encouraged to go out, because you got to lug all this crap out, and then it rains, and the weather changes. It's very annoying, the light doesn't stay the same. But Paul died a few years ago, so I haven't been out since. But this is over in Discovery Park. And as I say, these are quite small, being 12 by 15 inches, that kind of size. That's the UW there in the background. This is a painting. This is entering Idaho from Arizona. First snow. And this is quite large, titled "The Path to the Beach." And this is a study for that painting we just saw. Farm fence. And well, it's a metal. If you look at a tin can like this and have a light on it, there's a lot of information there. And I remember staring at it. What is the, what happens with this? Why is it, And finally, I saw it sort of clicks. Oh, I understand. And now I could paint one of these without looking at it, because I understand what the pattern is in the reflective on the various surfaces. But it looks more complicated than it is. But pretty straightforward still life painting. This one I like a lot. It's a meat grinder. This is acrylic, and it's obviously it's clamped onto a piece of wood, but the background I intend to be somewhere but nowhere in particular. It's just a space. This is a milk steamer, which I still have. And boxes are easy, well, to make, if one's inclined towards geometric abstraction, which I am, this is a good subject matter to deal with, a box. So. This would be oil painting. It's quite small, maybe 20 inches wide. I have no idea where a lot of these are. Some of them are. I know the one of the meat grinder. It's at the resale. I did it 20 years ago, and the gallery has it. So it's an estate sale, I think. Yeah. They have a lot of estate sales come up. They're really annoying. Well, I don't get any money for them, and they clog up the market. Yes.
Do you take time off for painting or drawing while you're traveling?
No. I used to, but no. Taking a road trip is something that I enjoy a lot, because you're doing something. Well, you have destinations, so you're going somewhere, and you can't do anything else but what you're doing. So it kind of satisfies your whole reason for existing, and of course you get to see the country. So I've driven. Remember arguing with my brother. I said I was going to have a show in New York, and I'm going to drive across Canada. He said, "Why are you going to drive across Canada?" And I said, "Well, because the curvature of the Earth is less, so it's actually shorter." And you stop for a moment, and that's almost plausible.
Question?
Yes.
The drawing taped to the wall,
Yeah.
were you thinking in mango?
No, I wasn't. I was just thinking of putting something on the wall. That's all. But I know the artist you're referring to. That it doesn't come out. No, but
Doesn't do anything for you?
no. I just wanted. Oh yeah. He's a fine painter, and so is his wife. But this. I wanted something on the wall, and I could have put a drawing of a nude or something, but I just did this. I mean, my inclination would be to But then it'd be about the figure, so then that wouldn't be any fun. Well, that's a little tiny slate. That's maybe 8 inches high. So not much information, and so where you put things is important. And that's a folding chair. I still have the chair. I don't sit in it. I only paint it. It's a it has nice reflections. This is acrylic, and I've done a couple versions of that chair. Oh, this is a C-clamp. That's about all I can say about it. It's about 20 inches high.
Are you setting up the drama between the new tool and the old crumbling wall?
Well, no. I put down that variegated background. It's just sort of an ambiguous background. I had a former student who she and her husband developed a company for backdrops for photography, and they'd rent these. They could be quite big or whatever. And she said the most popular one was amorphous gray. Just gray, but nothing in no pattern, no distinct pattern. And that's what this is about. Yeah, as I say, somewhere, but nowhere in particular. And as with this. Well, this I did, and somebody said, Norm, I've never seen you paint flowers. And I said, I can paint flowers. And so I painted these. Yeah.
It's sort of like redoing the Cezanne idea of fruit, isn't it? So you've got all this space.
Well, Cezanne used more than one angle of vision, which is different. But there's a nice, I would say this about it, because it only had one lemon. You just move it around. A nice, it's probably apocryphal, but it's nice. Somebody came to Cezanne and he had a still life of lemons and oranges and stuff, and they said, well, the oranges, he pointing to the painting, the oranges here don't look like the oranges there, and Cezanne said, I'm painting the oranges here. I'm not painting the oranges there, and of course he was. That's just a metal, that's the same can twice, but it's the a metal solvent can.
Excuse me,
Yes.
I don't quite get your comment about Cezanne painting.
Well, the oranges in his painting did not look like the oranges on the table. And he said, I'm painting these oranges, not those oranges. So, because he was the thing is, it's an idea that comes to all of us gradually. You're making a painting first, and then the illusion comes second. If you're including an illusion, the illusion is subordinate to making a painting. And so you move things around, change color, and do things to make it a better painting, not necessarily to make it more realistic. And a whole bunch of these. I did have a studio on First Avenue years ago. It had a metal window like this in it. And so these are all variations on that studio. But this is about 6 feet wide. And so, but you'll notice the windows will change configuration. But the objects are, tend to be very similar.
Did you have two studios downtown? Because there was one that you went to Ralph's grocery store.
Ralph's grocery store? No, that wasn't me. I had a studio. I can't remember the address. But it was a couple of blocks south of the old Sears building, yeah. The building's still there.
Are you intentionally blocking narrative from the
If there's narrative, it comes, but it's not the point. There is no.
I can see that here's this very strange juxtaposition of objects, nails, coffee, cans, and there's no way to create a narrative. So it out there to avoid any narrative possibility?
Well, these are objects that are around my studio. I mean, I still have that coffee pot, and I mean, these are objects that are around.
You didn't arrange it, it was just sitting there.
Oh no, I made a painting of it. That's all. Yeah, the objects were not there in this ever in this alignment.
In other words, you painted the oranges.
Yes, right. That's right. Exactly. And this one, I mean, I did it seriously, but it's an interior space, and you're looking out on a winter landscape, but it's on a wood panel, and right down the middle of it, the back of it has an X cross brace, and so there was a slight bulge here, right in the middle, and I remember my professors telling me never put something right in the middle of the canvas. And I said, well, let's see about that, because I wanted to kind of disguise the bulge. So this is right in the middle, and from that, this painting evolved. I said, well, now what am I going to make that into? Well, I can make it into a window frame, and so on. And that's how it evolved. But I want it to be, you know, as again, plausible space. I mean, I do wish as I would tell my students, you don't need to make things accurate, and sometimes you make them accurate, they aren't believable. What you want to make them is plausible, and that gives you a lot of liberty, I can tell you that. But same idea. These. I mean, I do have a step ladder and tables and you know, boxes and stuff sitting around. So these are, as I say, it's called a studio. But if you had visited my studio on First Avenue, it would be like this, but it wouldn't look like this. Does that make sense? Yeah. And they didn't have the big buildings across the street. The buildings are all 1 and 2 stories across the street. Oh, question, yes.
How long do you spend making that painting?
Sometimes it comes real quickly, and sometimes it don't. Effort is not does not coincide with accomplishment.
Do you sometimes do complete a painting in a day?
Oh yeah. Not very often though.
What's more typical?
You always want to go back and make this little correction and that little correction, and then you end up painting the whole thing all over again. But once again, as I say, I want the spaces to be plausible. And you know, a windowsill, if you want to paint a bunch of things in a row, the windowsill is handy for that. So, you know, there was a phrase in art history when I was a student. I remember a professor using. It's called the Florentine leap, and she was talking about how the artists of Florence and others in Italy during the Renaissance, Leonardo among them, would use the Florentine leap, which would be this: that you'd have the Madonna or subject matter in the foreground, Madonna and so forth in the foreground. Then you'd have a window, and which would be a landscape. No middle ground. You leap over the middle ground, and that's called the Florentine leap. That's what I'm using here. There's foreground and background, no middle ground.
Is this like a sentence? I mean, it looks like a sentence. You laid out all these different...
No, I painted them one at a time. I paint the one in the end, then one on this end, then maybe something else in the middle, and yeah. Similar. Now this is what I talk about redoing. I do have that model airplane. I have my model airplanes hanging in our home and studio. But see, you're looking down on the coffee cup. I just didn't like the composition. So this is the way, you know, coming back in, after I painted this, I changed it. So just look at the window and the model airplane, and this is what, you know, and I didn't intend to do this. It just happened. So I turned it into a winter scene, but I left the airplane, and then I put this still life in the foreground. And the painting's about 6 feet high, so of course the objects in the foreground, when you see the painting, they're larger than life. And there's a phenomena, if you're painting larger than life, you notice it in a painting. Oh, that's larger than life. But if things are smaller than life, you don't notice it. You only notice it when they're larger than life. So when you see this, that's sort of subliminal. Oh, they're larger than life. Yes?
Were the objects actually on the table?
No. I know perspective. Yeah. Well, you see enough of those. Well, thematically, it's an idea that I deal with to this day. Now, this is from my last show, which is about 2 years ago, and you wonder why, because that's not blue tape. It's painted on there. And so it's sort of it is sort of trompe-l'oeil because it's 1-to-1 imitation, so to speak. I mean, the tape is the size of what you see here. But I thought I would try it, and it's an idea you cannot do very often. But I've done it a couple times. Well, I'll say I think that's the last one. I thought I had more of those, but it's just an idea of tossing something abstract into the whole, now artists sometimes put tape on their paintings with the intention, oh well, I'm going to block that part out, So that part is not atypical, but I do keep the blue tape folks in business. I use blue tape all the time for, I put a piece of tape on the painting and say, what'll that be? I said, well, it can be a cup, it can be a bird, something like that.
So when I saw this show, I wanted to help you take the blue tape off.
Yes.
It's so real.
Well, I only after thought, but when I was giving my gallery talk, I was thinking about putting a piece of tape on there, and then saying, it looks so real you could pull it off, and actually, I didn't though. I mean, that's, that's my white cup. It's study of light on white. I think this is the last one I have. This is my interest in geometric abstraction, based on various trips I've had to Alaska. I've driven up there. Well, actually, I take the ferry up and drive back. Anybody here from Alaska? But anyway, it's loading cargo at a small dock, and that's it. I think that's the last one. It is. So thank you for coming in. See?
Are there any more questions? It was kind of fun that they were in. Oh, here's a guy.
Sure.
The first painting by Hopper with the diner,
Yeah.
its name includes what, Nighthawks?
It's called the Nighthawks.
Where does that come from?
People who go to diners in the middle of the night.
Oh, thank you.
My question is, where was your last show?
The Great Kucera Gallery downstairs.
Do they represent you?
Yes, they do.
Okay, so if we wanted to see the painting, we could break the chair.
Yes, you can. Yes.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, great,
Yeah.
Oh, Danny.
Unless you notice, I nailed it.
You did. Can you say what about the Munch painting was so compelling for you about his style of painting?
What was so compelling?
About Munch.
Well,
Well, all of us, not just the Scream.
before going to Norway, I'd seen an exhibition of Munch's prints, and of course, it was fascinated. And I remember I talked to one of my professors, and he says, "Well, why don't you apply for and go?" And so I did, because of course I was young, and that's a factor. But and it was the '60s, so it kind of an expressionistic era. So that's what compelled me to go, and those paintings of Munch. I say they're not his best paintings, but they are pivotal in a point in art history, which you can say before and after. And once he did that painting of the Scream, it kind of gave license to other artists to do things that were of extreme content like that. But when I got there, I was amazed at the beauty of his traditional painting, which was fabulous. His the portrait of his sister. All right. Thank you very much for listening to Pontificate.
Thank you all for coming.